being able to go out and try things without fear is crucial. I came in and I walked into the shop and it was just like, looking at all the tools, it smelled like sawdust and it was like, wow, this is incredible. And I was sold. I was like, absolutely. If I could work in this shop for a living, sign me up. I'll take it. I was diagnosed with Lyme's disease, so I wound up being unable to function and I couldn't go to school. My parents pulled me out of public school to recover and focus on my health. I went through an alternative program, allowed me to take courses and do my schooling at my own pace, which really helped because I was still recovering, and I graduated on time with my peers. I just hope that this inspires some young girl in 7th or 8th grade to ignore what everyone else says about whether they can or can't do the job that they love. I just hope that they find the courage to go and try things that maybe they've been told they can't do, and not be afraid to fail, not be afraid to make mistakes, and find something that they really enjoy doing.
On this edition of Forever Home, we're interviewing a young craftswoman who was recently featured on Mike Rowe's blog. We're going to talk about the unusual initiative she took to learn more about woodworking and how it landed her a job as a cabinet designer, fabricator, and installer in just a few short months. That's next on this edition of Forever Home. My name is Drew Cope. I'm a dadpreneur and one of the co-founders of Cope Construction and Renovation with my wife Tracy here in Cochranville, Pennsylvania. Today I have the pleasure of introducing you to Emma Wilson, a 19-year-old inspiring young woman from the northwest corner of Indiana. Those of you in our loyal tribe of raving fans may remember that I grew up just west of Indianapolis Motor Speedway, so Indiana holds a special place in my heart. In a very short period of time, Emma went from taking an inquisitive visit to a custom carpentry company to looking for some help with some small projects she was working on, to being fully responsible for their cabinet design and fabrication division. Mike Rowe shared a little bit about this story, about her story from her employer's perspective, and we thought our fans might like to hear from Emma. So it's my pleasure to welcome to Forever Home Miss Emma Wilson. Emma, welcome to the party.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Absolutely thrilled. Glad you are here. Emma, I'm sure a number of our followers have already read the blog article here on Mike Rowe's website or the Facebook page. But for those who haven't, let me share a little bit about what they have been missing. This has received over 8,400 shares, 5,500 comments, and 122,000 reactions. Emma, how does it feel to suddenly be famous?
It's crazy. I had no idea Joe was even messaging Mike. And so when it popped up on my Facebook feed, I was completely shocked, and I started getting all these comments and messages, and it was completely overwhelming.
I can imagine. What were some of the feedback that you got from folks?
Everyone was super encouraging, and so many nice comments, and attagirls, and telling me that I'm going to go far, and it was really nice.
That's awesome. I want to invite our viewers, if you're watching live with us over here on Facebook, we are going to try to pull the live chat up, and I'm going to grab that here on my phone so that I can see your comments. If you have questions that you want to ask Emma, you can plug those into the chat, and I will try to get those to us here at the some point later in our interview. So leave those in the comment. We got that up on my phone so I can see that. If you're watching on replay, we would love to hear from you as well, even if it's just simple as putting hashtag replay and telling us where in the world or what state you're watching from, so Emma can get a sense of where some of these folks are as her story gets out there. Emma, let's take a minute and let's showcase a little bit of your workmanship and some of the things that you have put together. So walk us through, we're going to go through these pictures a little bit and share with us some of the backstory here, some of the kitchens that you've put together and the different pieces that you've worked on, and tell us about these projects.
Okay, so this is a kitchen in a model home for Steiner Homes. It was, I think, one of the first kitchens I did almost entirely by myself. It had a lot of really big challenges in it that I'd never faced before, but I was really happy with how it turned out. This was the first cabinet vanity that I had to stain instead of paint, which was, as well as the island in the first picture, which is something I hadn't faced before, and it was thrown at me unexpectedly. And I was really happy with how it turned out.
What were some of the challenges, or what had you concerned about staining instead of painting?
Well, staining, you have to worry about how thick the stain is going on, and it's all spray staining instead of wiping stain. It was a completely different process, and it was one coat of stain instead of multiple coats of paint. You have to worry about which way the grain is facing, and mistakes were way more obvious with stained products than painted products. So it was quite a challenge.
A little nerve-wracking. Did Joe have you practice on some test pieces first, or how did that work?
Yeah, I had a couple of test pieces that he had me try out to see how it laid and how it turned out. And it all worked out. It looks pretty good.
Awesome. I love it. All right, let's go to the next one here.
So these are special, we call them slatted vanities. They've got a slatted shelf below them. And they're quite a challenge to put together. You got to cut all the pieces and sand them, and then fit them together to make sure they fit. And then you got to take them all apart to paint them. And then you have to put them back together once they're painted. And it was such a challenge, but they always look so good when they're finished. They're one of my favorite things to make.
It absolutely looks beautiful.
Thank you. So this was the first kitchen that Joe started kind of backing off and letting me do myself. And there were quite a few challenges. Those cabinets on the wall with 3 doors, those are 2 cabinets instead of multiple. And so the 3 doors on one cabinet was hard, trying to get all the doors to line up correctly. Yeah. Those proved to be quite difficult, but this was the first job that Joe started backing off and kind of let me make mistakes and figure out what I was doing. And it was a lot of fun learning how to do all this by myself. Not learning, but being able to try and figure out how things fit together without being told. So that's the finished product once the countertop's on and everything.
I think that's something you just said that is huge, and especially if you're a mentor and you're watching this, allowing our apprentices to make mistakes, allowing them to, I had a guy in Boy Scouts who used to say, if the kid's doing his Eagle Scout project and he tells you to come cut this board because the students weren't allowed to use power tools, and he marks it wrong and you see that it's marked wrong, I want you to cut it wrong and let the student learn the lesson of having the line in the wrong spot. And sometimes I want to correct, but we often learn more from our mistakes than we do from someone telling us how to do it right. And it sounds like Joe kind of let you, gave you some rope to play with, and it worked out for you.
Definitely. That's a lot of how I learned, was doing things wrong and seeing why we do things the way that we do. Because you learn that if you don't do things the right way, it doesn't fit together right.
And then you learn how to, that nail's in the wrong spot. How am I going to patch that hole, or that screw's in the wrong spot? Right. How do I move it? How do I adjust it?
Yeah, fixing your own mistakes is also really crucial.
Yeah. And I think maybe homeowners especially don't understand. It's like, oh, you're just going to come install these cabinets. Like, no, we're going to level the floor, level the ceiling, make sure everything's, make sure we got blocking in the wall in the right places, find the studs. And then once everything's hung, we still got to do crown mold. We still got to get those doors to all align, because if the doors aren't aligned, it's not going to look right.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's really about getting those details right. All right. And then where's this?
This is in the basement of that house we just saw. And it's like a basement bar. And those floating shelves were quite a challenge, figuring out how to make a box that slid over mounts that attached to the wall. And it was pretty fun building that one. It was just a smaller version of a kitchen.
Did you custom build those mounts, or did you order something prefab?
We built a frame that went inside of it, and then you mount the frame to the wall.
That is very cool. There's that, and there's not a lot of people that know. It's like, I want floating shelves, but I don't know how to. And unless they go to Amazon or somewhere and buy a bracket, they don't know how to do that. And the fact that you're able to build a frame, mount it, build this to fit over it, slide it in.
Yep.
One screw in the bottom and the back, maybe just to hold it right. That's awesome. Well done. Looks beautiful. What else we got here?
So this is by actually that other house was by Aldred Homes. It's a different builder. This was a built-in kind of entertainment center cabinet around the fireplace, and the open bookshelves above the cabinets. And actually, that left bookshelf behind it, you would never know this, but there's a door back there that they were going to make like a little cabinet to store things in, but they changed their mind. And so that base cabinet actually has an opening in the back that goes into what was going to be a closet. And so I had to make a weird, like T-shaped cabinet that fit back into that door space. And it was quite a challenge, but it was a lot of fun. It was definitely something I had never done before.
Sounds like when the family moves in, their kid's going to have a fun place to play hide and seek.
Yeah, you can go back into that base cabinet and stand up in it, and you're inside your own little room. And it's definitely a good place for hide and seek.
That's awesome. And okay, let's go to the next one here. This is great.
So this is the master vanity in that house, and the cabinets themselves are floating, so they're just mounted to the wall. And the medicine cabinet on the wall, though, that is one big unit, and it's like 70 some inches long, and it was one big cabinet that we had to bring in to the house. And every time we picked it up, I was afraid it was going to crack because it's only like 7 inches thick. Mm-hmm. And it was another big thing that I had never faced before, but Joe was like, here, try this.
And you're trying to take that 70-inch piece and slide it into this opening without scratching the paint on the walls.
Right. You got 3 inches about on either side of that cabinet, and it's going to fit perfectly centered. And I don't typically do install, but I do build the cabinets. And so while building, I have to think, is this going to fit through a door? Mm-hmm. Is this going to fit into the house? And it worked out. Looks pretty good.
And do I have to modularize it where it's going to go in pieces and then get reassembled on the inside?
Yeah.
That's always a challenge. Wow. This one's beautiful. Tell us about this one.
So this is the kitchen of that house. And actually, if you were to turn the camera around, you would face those built-ins that I made around the fireplace. And this was probably one of my favorite houses that I've made. It was so beautiful. And with the stained shelves between those two tall cabinets on the wall, I built those. And actually the builder, Lisa Aldred, one of the builders, she told me when I brought the shelves in, she said that I need to teach her painters how to stain because she loved the stain job so much on those shelves. They turned out beautiful. Yeah, this was definitely one of my favorite houses with the previous image, the black section off to the right. We called that the hutch, and it's got an X cabinet in the middle of it.
Let's see if I got it. There we go.
There we go. On the wall, there's an X cabinet, and so it was the first X I made. I had to figure out angles and how to get that X to mount together. And then I had to paint it and then put the cabinet around the X to make it fit and not ruin the paint job. And those are a lot of fun to make too. I think that's another really one of my favorite things to make is those X cabinets.
So do you remember how many total pieces you built for this kitchen?
I think it was close to 50.
My goodness gracious. And so just to give our viewers a perspective, because we probably have some homeowners here that we do kitchens for. Now, I don't fabricate. We bring them in from someplace. But when someone says, hey, I need 25 cabinets, and it's like, okay, well, that's going to be a 6 or an 8 week or a 12-week lead time sometimes. How long did it take you to make those 50 pieces?
The bigger jobs usually take about 2 months, 2.5 months. Kind of depends on the weather outside, because if it's cold, then paint takes longer to dry.
Yep.
And then we're fighting snow to get to the shop and all that stuff. But usually 2.5 months on the bigger jobs. Smaller jobs we can get done in a month and a half.
And are you guys building multiple kitchens at the same time simultaneously, or do you kind of start one, finish one, start the next one, finish the next one?
We usually have one job at a time just because of the size of our shop.
Yep.
And we don't have that. It's really just me and one other kid working at the shop most of the time. So we don't have the army of employees that could build a massive job. And but if we wanted to, we could definitely be doing multiple jobs at a time if our shop was bigger.
Wow, these are super impressive. Just great job all the way around. I'm just going to flip through these again because the craftsmanship, it looks amazing. And for you to be talking about those, to hear you talk about the details, the nuances of aligning the doors and getting this in without scratching the paint and thinking about how to, I can tell that Joe's been teaching you and you've been learning just a lot of those different nuances that go into fine craftsmanship. So this is just real. No wonder Joe wrote to Mike Rowe to brag not only about your skills, but your ambition as well. What have you found to be the most enjoyable part of working on these projects?
I think my favorite part is giving someone a product that they absolutely love and being able to match someone's vision with what they want to see in their house and being able to give them exactly what they're looking for and getting the feedback and the praise of, this is exactly what I wanted, you nailed it.
Awesome. Well, let's kind of rewind for a little bit. We've showcased some of your work and what you've been putting together, but let's rewind and talk a little bit about the backstory of how this conversation came together, if you will. So those of you who are loyal fans of our page and what we do, obviously you know that my wife and I are foster parents. We've been coaching and mentoring teenagers and young adults for close to 20 years. So when Tracy and I read your story, Emma, it resonated with us because a big part of what we do is to try to help young people who had a rough start in life to launch successfully into their adult lives. And your story really seemed to be a great example of what's possible if you take a little initiative. So I confess that Tracy and I did just a little bit of Facebook snooping, and we, through a series of things, we're able to find your page and your post about when you started your new job. And so I just left a quick little, encouraging comment, just put up there, just the atta girl kind of stuff that you were talking about a few minutes ago, and we'll get into that here in a minute, which led to us having a conversation on Facebook and then eventually scheduling this interview. So, Emma, let me ask you, I'm sure your parents are proud of your work ethic and your skills and how these projects have turned out, but share with us, how did your parents respond when you started getting all of this online attention?
We were actually sitting in the living room, and my dad got a message from his cousin in Florida that said, your daughter, have you seen this? Your daughter was posted by Mike Rowe. And my dad pulled it up and he's like, you are not going to believe this. And all of a sudden, all of us stopped what we were doing and went on Facebook and started reading comment after comment about giving me recommendations on what further schooling to do and just encouragement. I didn't even know who Mike Rowe was, honestly. And I look up who Mike Rowe is.
I won't tell him you said that.
Right, yeah. I look him up and I'm like, oh my gosh, my grandma used to watch this guy on TV. This guy is actually a popular person. And so we start scrolling through comment after comment, and 3 hours later, we're still scrolling through comments and reading what people have to say. And everyone was completely shocked.
Sounds like a very exciting day. Did you guys celebrate? Did you?
We did. It was late at night, and so we just sat up until past midnight looking at comments.
Wow.
And the next day, I was walking around like, I'm famous. Don't talk to me. I'm famous.
So what did you have a conversation? Like, Joe, why didn't you tell me? What was that? What was the next conversation with Joe after you found out that he'd told your story like this?
Joe, I saw him at the shop a couple days later, and he came in. He was like, man, I wish I was a fly on the wall when you guys saw what Mike had said. And he's like, he had emailed Mike just wanting to talk about me, and he had no idea that Mike was going to post about it. And so it was just as shocking to him that I was showing up on his feed as anybody else's.
That's awesome. And I love what he says. Mike Rowe adds his comment here at the bottom of it. Thank you, sir, for tell your protege I said hello. She is a rock star. And somewhere I found a comment from Joe responding to Mike Rowe saying, yeah, the word rock star is the word I use most often for Emma around the shop.
Yeah, I was surprised to see how he ended that, because that's all the time, every time. When Joe is talking to someone else about me and all the work that I've done, he's always used the term rock star. And so the fact that Mike used that term without even knowing that that's what I've been called, it was really shocking.
That's kind of cool. And I want to get to, Mike Rowe hinted at, where you could go from here with all this, and I don't want to talk about that, but I want to kind of share a couple other pieces first. Let's rewind this train a little bit and figure out, how did we get here? When I shared your story with our loyal tribe of raving fans, customers that have hired us, that left us a 5-star review and just raved about what our team did, the question several of our insiders really wanted to know more about was, Emma, how did you get excited about woodworking? I mean, we're going to pop some of these pictures back up here. Was this a recent idea, or was this something that started when you were young? How did we go from Emma a child to Emma 19 and finishing and installing 50 pieces in a kitchen?
Well, I've always enjoyed putting things together. I was always a kid to play with Legos and Lincoln Logs and all that kind of stuff. My parents would have to hide power tools from me as a child because my mom would be sitting in the living room and she'd hear like a sawzall going off, and she'd have to run to the backyard to figure out what second grade Emma is cutting apart. And so I've always enjoyed using power tools and creating things. And it started off as like a hobby. When I was bored, I would make like cutting boards and little things like that. And eventually I had made a cutting board and it didn't turn out how I wanted, and I needed to use a planer. And my dad knew Joe, and he called up Joe, and Joe's like, yeah, bring her in. I'll let her use my planer. And I came in and I walked into the shop, and it was just like looking at all the tools, and it smelled like sawdust, and he was stating something over on the table, and it's like, wow, this is incredible. And I used the planer, and Joe talked me through what the planer does and how it works. And then he let me use his sander. And while I was there, he kind of showed me what he was doing off on another table. And so it was, thanks, Joe. I appreciate it. We go. And a couple weeks later, I'm making another cutting board, and I make the same dumb mistake. And I call up Joe. And I'm like, Joe, I gotta use your planer again. And he's like, yeah, come back in. I come back in and I use the planer. And at this point, he's like, yeah, just use it. I don't need to walk you through anything. I've already told you, you could just use it. So I use the planer, and I think it happens one more time. And on the third time I come in, he's like, why don't you work for me? You could come and help me, and I can teach you how to do things, and you can come help do trim, or you can build cabinets or mantles or whatever you want to do, and I'll teach you. And I was sold. I was like, absolutely. If I could work in this shop for a living, sign me up. I'll take it. And that was it. From that point on, I was working with Joe and putting things together and doing what I love.
Kid in a candy shop on Christmas morning. Holy smokes.
Yeah.
Wow, and there's so much there that you said that I love and that I resonate with. It. You were 18 at the time, and he's like, you've seen how to unit. I showed you how to do it. And I don't know if this is a Midwest thing. I find that, like I said, my heart's in Indiana, that there's something about the Midwest that folks are just very trusting and and out here on the East Coast, we're very liability focused, and what if something, and for Joe to just say, hey, you've got this. I trust you. You know what you're doing. Go for it. Like that's real, and it speaks to him a little bit as a mentor, but also you must have shown up with some sort of just a personality and a drive that he says she knows what she's doing, that earned that a little bit. So your dad was telling us before our interview today that you had to overcome some really huge challenges in high school. Tell us about that.
Yeah, in sophomore year, I was diagnosed with Lyme's disease and postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, which is POTS. And it's a heart condition. And so I wound up being unable to function, and I couldn't go to school. Going to school, walking through the halls, when the bells would ring, it would echo in my head, and I wound up with huge migraines, and I got dizzy, and I couldn't function. So in order to save my GPA, my parents pulled me out of public school, and I took a year off to recover and focus on my health. And the following fall, I went through an alternative program that our public school offers that allowed me to take courses and do my schooling at my own pace and as fast or as slow as I wanted, which really helped because I was still recovering. And I was able to catch up with my graduating class and I graduated on time with my peers, even though I missed half of my sophomore year.
Wow. That's a lot to try to come back from, and for you to really catch up like that.
Yeah.
You're not afraid of hard work.
No, there's a lot of hard work in everything that I do, and you take everything as they come, and you just conquer everything you can.
So I'm going to guess, is that an ethic that you learned from watching your parents? You know, what do they do that you've picked that up, or that you've acquired that diligence?
Well, my mom is a very strong, confident person. She has always wanted to achieve her goals, and she wasn't afraid of what others might think. As a child, she grew up, she wanted to be a truck driver, and her parents told her that girls don't drive semis, and she couldn't. And so she turned away from her passions because her parents told her to. But then years later, she's like, you know what? I'm going to do what I want because I want to drive trucks. And so she got her CDL. And that is a lot of the inspiration for me, that I can do what I want to. And my parents have always told me that as long as what I'm doing pays my bills and makes me happy, I can do whatever I want and live life the way I want to. And pushing past goals and expectations is a huge part of how I was raised.
Find something you love to do. Find someone to pay you to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Never work a day in your life.
Right.
So while we're talking about overcoming challenges here, and I shared with you, Tracy and I are foster parents, and a lot of our kids often, the ones that come to live with us, whether it's for a weekend or several years, overcoming challenges is the name of the game. It's a full-time job when you're in the foster care system. So share with us, and I'm sure there's carpentry things that translate into life things, but what was something in the carpentry realm that you found really difficult at first, but as you pushed through it and kept trying and made mistakes and tried again, that it got easier and now you really enjoy it?
Well, as an 18-year-old girl when I started, I did not have the strength that most people in this job have. And so being able to lift huge cabinets that weighed almost as much as I did off the ground and moving them around the shop was a huge challenge. And I couldn't even lift like a 3/4 inch sheet of plywood by myself when I started.
I was going to say, a piece of sheet good to break that down, that's heavy.
Yeah. 1/2 inch plywood I could only carry so many before I was done.
How tall are you?
And 5'7".
So your wingspan, I mean, that you're trying to hold a sheet of plywood, your arm's just kind of, 48 inches, 5'7".
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was tough. And, when I first started, I talked to Joe. I'm like, I can't carry plywood. Not by myself. And he's like, okay, that's okay. I could carry 1/4 inch. So I carry 1/4 inch sheets of plywood everywhere. And then we would team up and do 1/2 inch and 3/4 inch and that kind of stuff. But eventually I got to where I could carry 1/2 inch plywood by myself. And then one day Joe's in the shop working and I'm doing my own thing. And I walk over to the shelf and I grab a 3/4 inch sheet of plywood. He's like, do you need help with that? I said, nope. And I picked it up myself and I walked it across the shelf. And he celebrated just as much as I did. And it was a huge milestone that now I can carry basic materials by myself across the shop.
That's awesome. I love that. And my wife had the nickname at summer camp growing up. They called her Jack because she was always carrying the 50-pound bags of sugar up from the storage area to the kitchen because, I'm not going to let somebody tell me what I can't do.
Yeah.
And, we found a panel lifting tool. I think it was called the Gorilla Grip. And it was one of those things you put on the top of the panel and you can, muscle it over in your shoulder. It's just, even if we got to find tools to make our lives easier, it's just a matter of finding a way. Not that, I can't do it, but we're going to figure out how. And it just sounds like you've just gotten stronger as you've been working in the shop and doing this more and more.
Yeah. There's also with big cabinets, obviously those are hard to move even as a strong man because they're big and
bulky.
Awkward. Yeah. So double oven cabinets that are like 100 inches tall, They're big and bulky. And when I'm working at the shop by myself, I've got to move those things. And so I came up with a scooter system that I could lay the cabinet down onto the scooter and then slide it around the shop and get it where I needed it to be. And that was a big thing that I came up with that made my job a whole lot easier.
Yep. If we want something bad enough, we'll find a way. If not, we'll find an excuse. We can do anything we put our minds to. It sounds like you figured that out. I absolutely love it. So, Emma, here's our ulterior motive here. And I've mentioned this a little bit, but Tracy and I found your story really inspiring. And I'm hoping that by helping you get it out there, you'll be able to influence and inspire other young adults who have an interest in the trades or really any career path to just jump in and start trying things. Your dad got you, hey, let's go see Joe. He can help fix this little oopsie with the cutting board. But Joe described his philosophy. So he described this process of how he kind of involved you slowly and then over time gave you more responsibilities. And I would love for you to share your perspective. We've heard Joe's perspective as kind of the mentor, but from your perspective as that mentee, as that apprentice, to explain to our viewers what that looked like from your perspective and how it's helped you succeed at Marathon Craftsman, with the idea being that, there are going to be other guys like me, mentors, people who have been in the trades a while, who are looking to bring in young people. What do we need to learn about how we can best help our apprentices figure things out as they're learning and growing? But also you're speaking to, other young adults like yourself of what they want to look for as they go searching out that mentor. So tell us about that mentorship process, this him showing you, kind of helping him show, you doing, and that slow transition of responsibility and what you liked best about that, how it helped you. What can you share with folks about that piece?
Yeah. So when I first started, he was kind of testing me on whether I would prefer working at the shop, building cabinets, or kind of on the job site, putting in trim. Mm-hmm. And so when I first started, we were on a trim job, and he was showing me how to trim out a door. And he walked me through all the steps. I had never held a nail gun before, let alone used one. And so he's walking me through all the steps, and I'm trying to take mental notes about how everything, the order of things. And he does one door, and then he hands me the gun. He's like, here you go. See what happens. And I was completely overwhelmed. I had no idea what was happening. I had tried to keep notes, but I was like, I'm going to screw something up. I'm going to mess something. I can't do this. But I take the gun and I try and follow his instruction. And it turns out that I did it fine and wasn't perfect, but he showed me what I did wrong and how I could improve. And then he left and worked on another part of the house and left me to trim outdoors. And over the day, I got better. And he would come along and give me a grade on each door to tell me how I did. He completely trusted me. It was really something that I did not expect him to do, is that he let me struggle and let me kind of make mistakes, and then showed me how to avoid making those mistakes in the future.
And that I think that's really huge. The fact that he has that coaching style to say, I'm not afraid to allow mistakes to be made, because then there's a learning process of how do you fix it when something doesn't work out right.
Yeah.
How is it different? I don't know if you've experienced this, but can you contrast the difference between training to do something and learning to do something when you have the teacher, the supervisor sort of hovering and watching and critiquing every step of the way, versus okay, here's how you got it, okay, and then leaving and then coming back and grading? How are those two experiences different for you as the student in this case?
I feel like when you have someone who's kind of watching over your shoulder, it's more stressful, and you're more worried about making mistakes, because as soon as you make those mistakes, not only do you recognize that it's a mistake, you also have someone who knows more than you who's standing there and going to tell you that you made that mistake.
Right.
Yes.
Pounce on that, right? Yeah.
Whereas if I am given the opportunity to do it without being watched, I can say to myself, I shouldn't have done that. And then when he comes back and looks at it, I can tell him what I did wrong. And so he knows that I recognize that I can do better. And it's much easier to learn when I'm able to recognize my own problems.
So if you have the opportunity here to speak to hundreds, if not thousands of other young adults right now, give them a couple tips, share a little bit about what you think they really should be looking for in a mentor or an apprentice opportunity, or perhaps what you really value most about what Joe has been providing for you.
I feel like the best part of working for Joe is the trust, and that he is willing to show me how to do something. And once I say I understand, he can back off. And he knows that if I tell him that I understand something, that I'm going to do it to the best of my ability, and that he can trust me enough to go and let me do it. It's huge, being given the freedom to not only do what I know, but also knowing in the back of my head that if something happens and I make a mistake, I can go to Joe and go, something's wrong, I messed up, and he'll come in and walk me through how to fix it. It's so liberating knowing that I'm not going to come back to him and get scolded for making a dumb mistake.
Yeah. So I'm going to flip the tables in just for a second. Let me speak to those of us in the trades who are in the position where we are mentoring young people and students like Emma who are coming up in the trades and learning and growing. Did you hear what she just said? Trust is a huge deal, and we have to give our mentees that trust, that opportunity to make mistakes or to succeed without us hovering. And I think we can glean as much from what she just said as what other young people may be gathering as well. That's what they want to be looking for, because that's really, truly, Tracy has experience over the last 20 years working with teenagers. That is the environment for growth. Yes, show them. Yes, teach safety. Yes, do different things. But at some point, we can't hover. We can't be helicopter. We've got to back off. We've got to give them room to make their own mistakes and to learn and to figure out the process that works for them, because the way that I hold a trowel or I hold a tool or I do something may not work quite as well for somebody else, and they may have to adapt to their style into those different things. So Emma, I think what you just said is huge and so helpful, not only for other students, but also for potential mentors who are looking for young people to join them in their businesses and what we're doing. We know you're learning about woodworking, obviously, and I hadn't realized that he was having you do door casing and some of those other things. Have you done a tray ceiling yet?
No, I haven't.
Okay. All right. Well, wait till you get those coffered ceilings and the really fun, the high-end trim work is so phenomenal looking. Takes forever, but it just looks phenomenal when it's done right. You're obviously learning about woodworking, but what other, life skills, intangibles are you learning working with Joe and working with these different clients and home builders that you're in and out through?
I'm definitely finding that there is a companionship that happens with other people in the trades. When we're on a job site, I'm not on a job site very often anymore. I usually stick in the shop. But when we're on a job site or we're going from one house to another, oftentimes we'll run into the same plumber or the same tile guy or the same flooring guy, drywallers. And so being able to recognize those people and knowing that they're doing the best that they can, and so we need to do the best that we can, and having that trust in other trades that they're going to try and do their best, so we need to do our best.
It really is a partnership. If the framing guy does his job correctly, the drywall guy's job is easier. And if the two of them do their job and that wall is stick straight, you've got no problem hanging your cabinets. If that framer has his studs all wonky, you're going to have a dickens of a time trying to get your cabinet faces to all line up. And it really is a team effort, isn't it?
Yeah.
How does, and if it does faith play a role in how you do life and the level of excellence you put into your trade? And if so, in what way?
I do know that Marathon Craftsman is heavily set in strong Christian beliefs, and that we are on this earth to provide for others and do our best for others. And Joe relies heavily on the idea that he's there to bring others up and teach new workmen, that they can do more, and teach them how to sustain themselves. And he finds that as his mission. I definitely believe that there's a heavy amount of faith. I would not be here without the gifts that I was given.
Very, very cool. So now that you've got your first full, it actually sounds like several full kitchens under your belt now, where do you think you're going to head from here? You're going to focus full times on kitchen and cabinetry, and it sounds like you're in the design side of the business as well now, meeting with clients on that front. Do you have any other talents we haven't heard about yet? What are your plans for the future? Where are you going from here?
Right now, I'm really happy with where I'm at. I really enjoy designing, starting from the base, getting sizes and knowing what cabinets I can fit in places, and then designing a kitchen and building the kitchen and installing it, seeing it through to the end. I really enjoy that. And I think potentially in the future, I might go for a design degree. But for right now, I'm really happy with where I'm at. I like doing what I'm doing.
Very cool. What advice would you give to a 16 to 22-year-old who is thinking about trying to get into the trades, but perhaps they're afraid or they aren't sure where or how to get started?
Find someone who knows what they're doing. Like Joe, he wasn't someone I went on Google to find a business. It was my dad knows a guy who does construction and maybe he'll help out. And finding someone we're familiar with that we know, that knows your background and knows your story, and being able to learn through them, and just going out and not being afraid of failing and not being afraid of making mistakes. If I was worried about failing and making mistakes, I would not have tried everything that I've done, and I would not be as successful as I am. And so being able to go out and try things without fear is crucial.
I think that absolutely is huge. And let me just speak to the other foster parents who may be watching this for a second. A lot of what you are hearing in this is that confidence that Emma has, and where did that come from, and how did she get that growing up? And a lot of the kids that are stuck in the system that are going to wind up living in our homes that we're going to be helping to provide some shelter for and helping them hopefully launch successfully into their adult lives, they don't have that level of fearlessness. They don't have that confidence. And every time they made a mistake, they were yelled at or they were put down or they were belittled. And so how can we as foster parents step into their lives a little bit and try to help rebuild that confidence? And maybe we only get a very short window of time to do that. And they had 12 or 13 years before they came to our homes for us to speak into that. But as you hear Emma talk, that's one of her keys to success. And anything that we can do to help instill that into the foster children that live in our homes is going to help them be able to chase that same sort of success. And if you grew up in a home that you had a hard time with, surround yourself with people who do instill confidence in you, who will trust you, who will give you those opportunities, because that's one of those places that you're going to grow. So that's my little soapbox. I'll get off of that right now. Emma, I know that Joe's not super active on social media, but you said he did have a website. Let's go ahead and share that with folks. So marathoncraftsman.com. Do I have that right?
Yes.
Awesome. So if folks want to, see some more of the work, they've got a portfolio up there and some information there for where she's working and what she's doing there. Emma, what haven't I asked you about that you would really like to share with other ambitious young adults like yourself this morning?
Well, I have found through Mike Rowe's post that there are communities out there, especially for women and girls in this area. There are groups out there of people like me who are minorities in this job that I can go and talk to and compare myself to them and know that I'm not the only one in this position, that there's support out there for girls like me. I'm not the only one doing this job, which is huge, having that support of someone who's like me.
Absolutely. I know my wife and I, she actually is the majority owner of our business, and she's found a couple of different social media groups, Facebook groups. Women of the Trades is one of them, and I know that there's others where it's not just I'm the wife of a contractor. No, this is my business. I own this. I run this, and I'm working in a man's world, and it really is crucial. Tracy really enjoys having that camaraderie that come with those groups, so that's really cool. Anything else you want to share?
I just hope that this inspires some young girl in 7th or 8th grade to ignore what everyone else says about whether they can or can't do the job that they love. I just hope that they find the courage to go and try things that maybe they've been told they can't do, and not be afraid to fail, not be afraid to make mistakes, and find something that they really enjoy doing.
We might just have to edit that clip and make that the leader on this video, because I think that that sums it up really well. Emma, fantastic job this morning. We want to thank you for joining us on this edition of Forever Home, a show dedicated to educating homeowners on how to protect their most valuable asset by knowing the right questions to ask when hiring a contractor for work in their home. We're going to put some links in the description of this video to both the Mike Rowe article on Emma and Joe, and also a link to, obviously, Marathon Craftsman and anything else that we can think of that we might be helpful for you guys. If you have any questions for Emma, please leave them in the comments below. No promises, but maybe she'll swing by again and try to respond to some of those. It sounds like they got overwhelmed with all the comments in the original Mike Rowe post blowing up. So I don't know if she's going to get back to everybody, but leave your questions, leave your comments down below. And if nothing else, just encourage her and other young people who are watching this and thinking about getting their start in the trade, especially that young girl in the 7th or the 8th grade that you mentioned. That's phenomenal. Most importantly, if you're a young adult and you're trying to figure out how to launch successfully into your adult life, we hope you found some of this conversation helpful today. If you have comments or questions, we'd love to hear from you as well. That's going to wrap things up for us here this morning. We want to thank our guest, Emma Wilson of Marathon Craftsman in Indiana, for joining us today. We're finished with it. You're proud to say it's not just done. It was coat built. We'll catch you on the next edition of Forever Home. Bye for now.